Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. Do you know who had a great day yesterday? Joss Whedon. And that's because Empire magazine released the 25 covers for X-Men Days of Future Past that they intend to publish, one for each character. And right there, does that scream my movie's too crowded or what? I don't know why. I guess one cover is for Bryan Singer and one cover is for Rogue, which I find very odd considering that she was cut from the film. But at least she gets a cover. And she still doesn't look quite as good as I think everybody would like her to look as the character, which I'm confused about because I thought she was really going to leave her mark on it this time with all the Southern belle, with the attitude experience she has on True Blood. But anyway, if you want to see these 25 covers, I've put a link in the video description for where you can check them all out. And I'll go through some of my favorites and the ones I'm not so crazy about in a moment, but the one that really turned a lot of heads, and a lot of you even tweeted me about it, was Quicksilver. And that's why Joss Whedon is in such a good mood, because this is such a horrific version of Quicksilver, you can see it here, that I think he has nothing to worry about with his version coming up for Avengers 2, Age of Ultron, to be played by Aaron Taylor Johnson. And he'll also have the Scarlet Witch, so he's going to have, the more iconic, brother and sister duo. Of course, he doesn't have Magneto, but I can see why, hopefully, this Quicksilver isn't Magneto's son, because I think Magneto would be like, I don't want any part of that. My genetic code would never wear that. And it's such a surprise. It's such a surprise move by Bryan Singer, who I think we all were so happy with getting the first few X-Men films so right. X-Men, of course, and X2 really were some of the best first comic book movies to come out. X2 was an amazing theater experience to see that opening scene with Nightcrawler with that attempted assassination at the White House. It was just like right out of a comic book. And, he made some odd choices. The Mystique one turned out to be a really good choice. His famous quote about who doesn't love to look at blue boobs, that's what he said, and he was right. It's worked wonders for first Rebecca Romijn, and now Jennifer Lawrence is doing very well in the role, although as many of you know, it's my pet peeve that since Mystique is very old because she doesn't age as a shapeshifter, there's no reason that Rebecca Romijn couldn't continue to play the role that she was very good at. I think that she's a big part of why those movies worked in the beginning. I think a lot of credit goes to Hugh Jackman, Patrick Stewart, and Ian McKellen, but I think Rebecca Romijn deserves a lot of that credit as well. But anyway, I digress. I guess once you have Jennifer Lawrence cast, you're not going to certainly get rid of her. But it's frustrating to me. But anyway, this Quicksilver costume, I guess I can see where it's coming from. I mean, it does take place in the 60s. I guess they feel that's what someone in the 60s would dress like. But it's just I think we've all been burned so much by Joel Schumacher that when we see a creative choice like this, we really back off. It's very scary. And I think it's so cartoonish and so Hollywood, so not understanding the source material, which again, I think we all expected more out of Bryan Singer, that I think Joss Whedon is in a great position that he can pretty much do anything, in the span of normal, and he would be considered to have the better Quicksilver. So they can all breathe a sigh of relief over at Disney Marvel. I'm sure they were a little concerned about this, but I think, and many of you do, that this is just a ridiculous look for the character, and I just don't know how they expect people to take this seriously. I mean, the whole thing kind of screams X-Men The Last Stand, particularly the futuristic elements, from the future I guess Wolverine will come from, and I don't know why Bryan Singer would emulate a film, which, by the way, was very successful at the box office, but why he would emulate a film that is so disliked and has such a negative reputation in the fanboy, and even, I believe, mainstream comic book movie fan group. I think nobody has fond memories of X-Men, X3 The Last Stand. But the other covers I liked, so I thought Rogue, I don't know why she was there. She had some weird kind of outfit on. I wasn't crazy about that. I did love, though, loved Bullet Hole Wolverine. He looks just like, I think it's by Esad Ribic. There's this great iconic cover of Wolverine, which he was in the middle of reading a book and drinking a beer and someone shot him all up. And it's just I think he was reading like On Walden Pond by Thoreau. It's just such a perfect, iconic cover. And so encapsulates what Wolverine is all about. To see it recreated here so well, I think is the best thing I've seen of Wolverine. The closest I've seen Hugh Jackman to emulating what's on the page. And I'm very impressed with it. It gives me hope for future Wolverine films. I think his futuristic costume doesn't look as good as I would have hoped, but I love the Bullet Hole Wolverine cover. I think that Blink, she looks okay. I think they're trying to adhere very close to the Age of Apocalypse design for the character, which I understand. Or maybe even the one that she had when she was brought back into the Young Avengers for a little bit, I believe. That's where she was. Yeah, I think it was Young Avengers, yes. Or New Mutants. Yes, the New Mutants, when they rebooted that. And they had them like on their own in San Francisco, I believe. So she looks kind of like that, maybe. But something about it isn't translating. She's not translating as well as Mystique. And also, how much time are these characters going to have, considering there are 24 covers, because actually 23, I guess, because there's 2 Wolverines. But, and also Sunspot, you see Sunspot here, his power signature looks pretty good, but he doesn't turn into, the black hole, black energy that he does in the comics, as we predicted, because it's just too expensive to do, probably, with special effects. But that takes away a lot of what I think makes the character very cool. Although, I guess these future mutants are bringing some diversity into the mix, which is nice. But the X-Men were way ahead of the curve in the movies when they did all this in the 70s, when, Storm was brought in, and, Warpath at that time, and of course Wolverine. When Canada was considered diversity. All right, so I think obviously there's no doubt about it. Quicksilver looks ridiculous, and I think that with all these covers, I think we're all very nervous for this movie. I'm just saying it better be a power smorgasbord. I better just see powers being used left and right. That would be the only thing that would distract me from perhaps the potential ridiculousness of this movie. And Michael Fassbender as Magneto. He's very good as Magneto, and he looks pretty good here. All right, so that's the first story of the day. The second story of the day is that I was just talking about how I wanted to see a King Arthur movie after walking out of The Hobbit: The Desolation of Smaug, because Peter Jackson had so perfectly captured the illustrations in the old Tolkien books that it made me feel I would be so pleased if someone were to capture the illustrations of Arthurian legend. Everybody, I'm sure, has their own illustrated version from their childhood that they loved. I had so many, actually, picture books, and I just loved looking at them. I thought they were great. And it looks like Warner Brothers is really trying to get a King Arthur film franchise off the ground. And the one that looks to be moving forward, they tried to do one with David Dobkin, with Kit Harington from Game of Thrones, and Joel Kinnaman from RoboCop as Arthur and Lancelot, some kind of buddy kind of a thing. David Dobkin, of course, is a comedy director, but that didn't quite work out. And now they're really circling the 6-film franchise. It would be 6 films to tell the whole Arthurian legend, and it would be directed, though, by Guy Ritchie. Now, that's really where they start to lose me. Now, granted, he's a UK talent, so I'm sure he has tremendous respect for the source material, and a good feeling for, UK culture. Although, if any viewers in the UK, let me know what you guys think of Guy Ritchie over there. Does he get it right? Does he get you? Or does he seem as like, he makes... A Guy Ritchie film is very distinct. Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. These are good movies. And I liked the first Sherlock Holmes. The second one was just a mess. And although the first Sherlock Holmes, I have to say, had a mystery that was unsolvable to anyone watching the film. And I still to this day am annoyed that luckily Sherlock walks into a room which has all the clues in one place for the whole mystery. I was like, wow, that's really convenient. But some of the aspects that he introduced for Robert Downey Jr.'s Sherlock were interesting. I think the Watson dynamic he created with Jude Law was pretty good. And of course, he has a wonderful film score that really helped him out there, which was phenomenal and really made the movie, I think, to a large extent there. But I really question his ability to deliver a Peter Jackson-style King Arthur epic, which I really think is what Warner Brothers is going to need. But I find it fascinating that Warner Brothers is just so into the UK business. Of course, they have the Harry Potter films, and they also, which are very British, at J.K. Rowling's request, but maybe Warner Brothers is starting to see the benefit in that. And then also they have, the Lord of the Rings franchise, obviously, which, Tolkien, it feels very UK. And also, the other thing you might not be aware of, I covered it a couple times here on Beyond the Trailer, is that they recently purchased Leavesden Studios. Leavesden Studios is an iconic film studio, basically for shooting films. They shoot all the big movies there in the UK, even the American ones that go to shoot in the UK, such as Skyfall. Films like a lot of the James Bond films, in fact, are shot there. It's a really huge production studio. They're going to shoot Star Wars there, I believe. But now Warner Brothers owns it. And so that was a huge purchase. And of course, they've built their Harry Potter walkthrough there, a permanent installation of the Harry Potter sets that you can go and visit. And I'm sure they would love to have a King Arthur attraction that you could visit as well when you go there. So I can understand why they're so keen to get this off the ground, but there has to be a better director than Guy Ritchie. I just feel he's going to make it like... I appreciate the modernness that he could potentially bring to it, because he was respectful of still the Victorian aspects of the Sherlock films, but I feel that Guy Ritchie just isn't a great storyteller, and I feel he really lacks depth. He's almost like a little bit better UK version of McG. And I think nobody would be happy if McG was, asked to do like an American Revolutionary story or a Davy Crockett set of movies. I'm trying to think of like an American legend. But I want to see a King Arthur franchise. I think Warner Brothers is right to pursue this, but I think a different director would be better. Who would you guys like to see? Who would you be interested in seeing direct a fantasy film? I hope it's fantasy. I hope it's a mix of fantasy and war. That's another thing of Arthurian legend. Could be Game of Thrones level good. Maybe they should go find, I guess I'd call up those writers, I forget their names. One is Benioff. He's married to Amanda Peet. But I would get that duo, that writing duo, and be like, again, I'd be like, just like Disney does with their checkbook, I'd be like, what's it going to take for you to come and work on this film? All right, so that's the second story of the day. The third story of the day, I think a lot of people will be very happy about, and that's that yesterday, the National Association of Theater Owners, aka NATO, which sounds a lot like the, exactly like the, the actual government organization. So it's very, very distracting. But this is NATO movie theater owners. And they are coming out with a set of rules for trailers that they really want to have passed, and they want the distributors to go along with it. I think it's a great idea. Let's go through the rules first of all. All right, so trailers can be no longer than 2 minutes. Also, you cannot advertise and run a trailer more than 150 days before the film will be released, and a 120-day limit for any in-theater advertising, I guess, like posters and standees. You can't advertise here. This would be saying you can't advertise a film a year in advance. Also, they said, however, and you can't have any calls to action in the trailer. You can't say, go to this URL and go sign up to this website and do stuff like that, because they said that will help discourage phone use during the movie. Although, I don't think anybody during a movie is trying to log on to a movie site when they're using their cell phone. I believe, it's been my experience, they are just bored and had no interest in the movie in the first place, so they're just texting their friend or someone calls them during the movie, and for some reason they feel, hey, I should answer it. I don't know. I don't understand the logic in that kind of thinking. I never will. All right, so those are the rules. Now, however, there will be 2 exceptions that each distributor gets a year. They can have 2 trailers that can run longer, and they can be up to 3 minutes. And of course, a lot of people in Hollywood are speculating how that will be decided, and kind of the jockeying for those 2 exemptions from filmmakers, who of course want to have the best advertising possible for their film. Now, I think this is great, and some people are saying, well, this isn't enough. Actually, you also have to limit the number of trailers you're showing. But I guess this is a start, and I'm just happy at all to see theater owners stepping up to the plate and trying to start policing the movie-going experience on our behalf. I said this, I thought, when I covered that tragic shooting on the texting. A lot of the coverage said, oh, well, this movie theater says no texting on your phone and no firearms. Yet it did nothing to enforce either rule. So I just want to see theater owners continue to step up to the plate and do some, and really, wrangle distributors who are going to push things as far as they can get away with. So we can't do anything about it, so it's up to the theater owners to step in instead. And I would like to see a limitation as well. I mean, we've all discussed this a number of times. They show like 20 to 30 minutes of content now before a movie. Your snacks are cold, or you've eaten them all before the movie starts. And sometimes you're just like, what am I seeing again? And also a lot of times, you've seen the trailer so many times online, you're like, I don't really need to watch it again. I've seen it. All right, so that's the third story of the day. Now on to today's viewer question. This comes from Edwin Lee Comedy. And Edwin Lee says, hi Grace, I started writing screenplays a year ago. Congratulations, that is a very difficult endeavor. And on several episodes, you said Toy Story 3 was emotionally manipulative. I have, that's true. I don't want to be accused of being emotionally manipulative in my writing. Can you expand on what that means? Like give examples or just tell me how to avoid it. Thanks. My pleasure, Edwin Lee. However, I have to tell you, Toy Story 3 is an extremely successful film. Avatar, a very successful film. Gravity, very successful. Frozen, I talked about this just the other day, about how these films have emotional hooks, and I think to some degree are emotionally manipulative. I think you could even argue Titanic. James Cameron is a master of manipulating emotions so well that people don't see the horrible flaws in his work. Now that's impressive. And I think the same, actually, I would argue with Frozen. I mean, a lot of you guys still defend Frozen, and I see where you're coming from, but it's just so sloppy and full of holes. Someone actually tweeted me about this, and I said I also felt it promoted antisocial behavior and really encouraged running away from your problems, which, I was raised to believe is not a good course of action. And I feel, of course, when you go to the woods, you can be anybody you want. You can be your true self, and that's why people love the woods and why people are scared of the woods. It's a lot more difficult to try being who you want to be in society, and society won't miss you when you run away. It's not society's loss, it's your loss. And I really encourage everybody to just find a way to make it work. Why should you have to leave? Why do you have to be excluded from the group? Find a way to work with the group. So, I think compromise is better for everyone than having everyone have the things on their own terms in separate camps. So I don't think that's effective at all. So that was actually one of my big problems with Frozen. All right, but on to emotionally manipulative. So maybe, Edwin Lee, you want an emotionally manipulative script because it seems to work. Now, the reason I thought Toy Story 3 was emotionally manipulative was that, okay, this is a spoiler if you haven't seen Toy Story 3, but really, if you haven't by now, you can't blame me for a spoiler. when they have that scene when they're going into the incinerator. I felt that was just, it was too intense a moment and too horrible, and a Holocaust reference. I felt that it wasn't appropriate for a family, largely children's film. And I thought to put a Holocaust reference in a film like that, or it reminded me actually of September 11th a little bit when I was watching it. I thought to bring up that emotion it was intentional, and it was to get people to have, and it was drawing on other things. So I guess that's what I'm saying. It's not doing the work in the script, it's drawing on things that you already know are triggers for people emotionally. Dying with loved ones, having to face death and knowing that you can't escape it. I mean, these are horrifying concepts that I think we've all wrestled with in our imaginations, especially when we read of these horrific circumstances when it actually did happen to people. And, especially the scene when they have the characters hold hands, before they're like, let's die holding hands. I thought it was just such a perversion of real life events that, just came out of nowhere for the effect of getting a cry to really making you feel horrible while watching the movie. And it wasn't earned through the course of the film. It just was like, oh my God, here comes an incinerator out of nowhere. That I really just felt manipulated emotionally. And that's where I think it's coming from. I don't mind a good cry in a movie. Saving Mr. Banks, I was crying all over the place. But they earned those cries. They did the work in the script. They hit the points. They built it. It built up over time. I was emotionally invested in the characters. So that when they went to the sad place, I went with them. The other one is, I'm just enjoying a movie, having a good time, and bam! You hit me with something just horribly tragic. And I've seen people talk about this with Gravity, saying, it really got me, the speech about her daughter, having died. And it's like Alfonso Cuarón and his son Jonas, instead of showing, they could have even had a prologue to that film. They could have had a flashback. When she blacked out, she could have seen that. She could have experienced that with her child. And, they didn't have the time to develop any of the relationship bonds. They didn't have any time to develop the bonds between Clooney's character and Bullock's character. They just had horribly sad things happen to just keep kind of like poking you with an emotional stick. Instead of, as I've been saying here, doing the homework to establish the relationship so when they do fall apart. You don't bother to make me become attached to a character. You use like stereotypes of like country music for George Clooney's character. Okay, now I know what kind of guy he is. And also the fear of floating off into space and dying. I mean, that's just horrific, and that's what that's what's created. So, Edwin, my answer to you is, don't pull from the outside to get a cry. Don't reference something. Don't try and have like a sad competition with your audience, being like, you think that's sad? Wait till I have this happen to the character. For no reason at all, but for the purpose to make you feel bad. It doesn't work with the character development. It doesn't add to the arc. It's not saying something. It doesn't have a message. It's just to make you cry. That's my problem. And so I would say earn those moments, build them up in your script, and say, is this organic? Did this happen within the film? And does it serve the film? Does it serve the story, or does it just make people cry? Now, granted, as I said, people cry. They apparently love the movie. Buy a ticket. So you really have to decide, maybe you can find a happy medium. So that's my answer to your question. Thank you for asking, Edwin Lee Comedy. I hope it was helpful. Good luck with your screenwriting. That is a very difficult and arduous task, but if you can stick with it, more power to you. I think that's where people have the hardest problem, sticking with it, because it's a very hard thing to do. And make sure you outline. That's the biggest thing. People are always reluctant to outline. So like, the movie's unfolding in my head. And that's not true. If I can tell you anything from my own writing and comics, and I wrote some screenplays when I was studying film, you need the outline. You need to know where you're going. All right, so thank you everybody for tuning in. Write down below what you think of today's 3 stories, the viewer question, and anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.